Cold fluorescent light washed over the medical staging area, turning sweat on steel into a dull gray sheen. Wet boots lined the wall in crooked rows, gear lay half unpacked on metal tables, and the distant thump of helicopter rotors rolled through the night like a slow, restless heartbeat. SEALs filtered in from the rain, shoulders sagging, faces streaked with dust and fatigue. Someone muttered about the patrol being a waste of time. Another complained about the weather. The usual dark humor followed, but the edge beneath it felt sharper than normal. Tyler Reed dropped his helmet onto a table and smirked toward the far corner. "You ever notice how the quiet medics always end up hiding behind everyone else?" he said. "Dead weight on real missions." A few men chuckled. Another operator tilted his head, lowering his voice into an exaggerated whisper. Excuse me, guys," he said, mimicking softness. "Can everyone please be quiet?" Doc needs her library voice. More laughter rippled through the room. At the end of the table, Hospital Corpsman First Class Elena Cross worked a cloth across her trauma shears, scrubbing dried blood from the serrated edge. Her movements were slow and precise. She did not look up. She did not flinch. Her eyes stayed on the metal as if nothing else existed. The door opened. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Holt stepped inside, water dripping from his sleeves. He caught the last echo of laughter, scanned the room once, then shifted his gaze to the wall clock and the mission board beside it. He said nothing. The noise died on its own. The tension hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Elena remained where she was, quietly cleaning her tools, while the silence around her settled into something heavier. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to FOB Veteran Stories. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Elena Ellie Cross was 32 years old, though most people would have guessed younger from the way she carried herself. She moved with a small, controlled posture, shoulders squared but never stiff, like someone who had learned long ago how to take up as little space as possible. Her dark hair was always pulled tight into a simple bun, not a strand out of place. Her sleeves stayed down even in heat, and her boots were kept clean in a place where almost nothing stayed clean for long. Her rank tape read Hospital Corpsman First Class. To SEAL Team 7, that meant one thing. She was their medic. She was the person who stopped bleeding, pushed fluids, managed airways, and kept men alive long enough to get them home. In that sense, she was trusted. In every other sense, she was invisible. Elena was invited to work. She was rarely invited to belong. No one questioned her medical skills. She was fast, methodical, and steady under pressure. Wounds closed quickly under her hands. Tourniquets went on without fumbling. Needles slid in clean. But when conversations drifted toward past deployments, gunfights, or near misses, Elena was never part of them. She did not interrupt. She did not add stories of her own. She usually sat nearby, cleaning gear or checking supplies, listening without expression. That silence became its own label. Quiet meant timid to some. Quiet meant unsure. Quiet meant probably not cut from the same cloth. Elena did nothing to correct that assumption. She did not boast. She did not exaggerate. She did not trade war stories or inflate small moments into legends. When others argued about who had seen the worst firefight, she stayed focused on inventory lists. When the team gathered after missions to drink and decompress, she usually excused herself early, citing restock duties or early checks in the medbay. To the louder personalities on the team, that distance looked like weakness. Tyler Reed once said she had the personality of a filing cabinet. No one challenged him. What most of them missed were the small patterns. Elena always checked her own harness before stepping onto aircraft, even if someone else had just inspected it. She ran her fingers along buckles, tugged on straps, and paused for half a second longer than necessary. She listened to helicopters the way some people listen to music, head tilted slightly, eyes unfocused, as if cataloging sounds. She noticed wind direction without looking at flags. She stood closer to aircraft noses than tails. When pilots walked around their birds before missions, Elena often watched from a few steps away, pretending to organize her medical bag while her eyes tracked their movements. None of it was obvious enough to raise alarms. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Holt ran his team with ruthless efficiency. He did not care about personalities, friendships, or social friction. His expectations were simple. You were either competent or you were gone. He spoke in short sentences, gave clear orders, and had little tolerance for complaining. Holt saw Elena as competent. That was the full extent of his opinion. She was on the roster. She passed evaluations. She caused no problems. In Holt's mental filing system, that placed her firmly in the category of acceptable and forgettable. Senior Chief Mark Hanlon, the team's senior enlisted leader, noticed more than he said. Hanlon had spent enough years in uniform to recognize discipline when he saw it. Elena's gear was always squared away. Her medical kits were arranged the same way every time. Her posture never collapsed, even after long movements. He also noticed how she absorbed insults without reacting. Hanlon did not intervene, not because he agreed with the treatment, but because experience had taught him that people revealed themselves eventually. Interfering too early sometimes robbed others of that lesson. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, a small group of Afghan civilians approached the outer gate. Among them was a young boy limping badly, his heel blistered and raw from walking miles in thin sandals. The guards called for the medic. Elena arrived with her bag slung over one shoulder. She knelt in the dust in front of the boy, ignored the stares, and gently removed the sandal. She cleaned the wound, applied ointment, and wrapped it carefully, explaining each step to the boy in slow, simple words. Her hands were gentle. Her voice was calm. When she finished, she handed the boy a small packet of pain reliever and gave him a faint, reassuring smile. Then she stood, nodded to the guards, and went back inside without comment. No one applauded. No one mentioned it. Inside her medical bag, taped to the inner lining where only she ever looked, was an old, worn coin. One side bore a faint outline of a helicopter. The edges were smooth, rubbed down by years of fingers passing over the same metal. Elena never took it out in front of anyone. She never spoke about where it came from. That evening, Holt gathered the team. Intelligence had confirmed a high-value target moving through a narrow valley several kilometers away. The window to intercept was small. The terrain was hostile. The weather was deteriorating. Night infiltration. Short notice. Everyone began loading gear. Weapons were checked, radios tested. Plates tightened. Elena secured her med bag, tugged once on the strap, and stepped into line with the others. Whatever the night held, it was already moving toward them. The Black Hawk waited on the pad with rotors already turning, blades cutting slow, heavy circles through misty air. Red interior lights spilled from the open door, painting armor, helmets, and faces in a dull crimson glow. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with oil and damp earth, thick enough to coat the back of the throat. The team moved with practiced rhythm. One by one, SEALs climbed aboard, boots clanging against metal flooring, knees knocking into seat frames in the cramped cabin. Rucksacks were shoved between legs, weapons were cradled tight against chests. Night vision goggles were flipped down, bathing everything in ghostly green. Elena took a seat along the forward bulkhead, wedging her medical bag beneath her boots. She clipped her harness, gave it a firm tug, then placed both hands flat on her thighs and waited. Across from her, Tyler Reed leaned back against the fuselage and shook his head with a faint smirk. "Lucky gig you got, Doc," he said through his headset. "Medics never gotta make real decisions. You just patch holes and hope for the best." A couple of SEALs chuckled. Reed continued, voice casual, almost bored. "Meanwhile, the rest of us gotta decide who lives and who doesn't. Heavy stuff." Elena did not respond. She leaned forward, unzipped the side pocket of her med bag, and reached inside. Without looking, she stood, took 2 steps toward the cockpit, and peered past the crew chief. "Where's your tourniquet kit mounted?" she asked. The crew chief, Staff Sergeant Owen Klein, blinked. "Left side, under the console," he said. Elena nodded, committed it to memory, and returned to her seat. Klein watched her for a second longer than necessary before turning back to his panel. The doors slid shut. The engine whine deepened. The Black Hawk lifted, shuddered once, then climbed into the night. The forward operating base lights fell away quickly, replaced by endless darkness and the faint outline of mountains under starlight. Wind buffeted the fuselage, making the metal skin creak and groan like something alive. Radio chatter filled their headsets in short, clipped bursts. 2 birds airborne. Package secure. 10 mics to infill point. Elena kept her eyes forward. She could feel the aircraft through her boots, the vibration pattern, the rhythm of the blades, the subtle changes in pitch as the pilot adjusted power. Below them, the terrain began to drop. Jagged ridgelines gave way to a narrow valley carved deep into the earth, a black slash between darker shapes. Sparse clusters of mud-walled compounds dotted the valley floor, barely visible. In the second helicopter, Afghan partner forces rode in silence, their own tension thick and contained. The radios grew quieter. No one joked anymore. The first sign of contact came as a faint flicker, a brief wink of orange light far off to the left. Then another. Then a sharp crack that cut through the rotor noise. The aircraft jolted. A warning tone shrieked through the cockpit. Klein swore loudly. The Black Hawk lurched, dipping hard to one side before the pilot wrestled it back level. Taking fire, Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Price shouted. Another crack. This one closer. Price grunted. Blood sprayed across the lower edge of the windshield. Elena was on her feet before anyone called for her. She moved forward as far as the harness would allow, bracing one knee against the seat frame. "Stay with me," she said, voice steady. Price's left shoulder was soaked red. The co-pilot slumped sideways, unconscious, helmet tilted at an unnatural angle. The aircraft was still flying. Barely. Elena clipped her harness to an overhead anchor point, keeping herself from being thrown as the helicopter bucked. She pulled a tourniquet from her pouch and cinched it high on Price's arm. "Pressure here," she instructed, guiding his good hand. Price nodded through clenched teeth. "Talk to me," Elena said. "Can you feel your fingers?" "Yeah," he hissed. "Good, keep talking." Behind her, Holt watched the exchange. Not the wound, not the blood. The calm. Elena's voice never rose. Never wavered. The Black Hawk began to lose altitude. Klein called out, engine temperatures climbing fast. Price fought the controls, jaw clenched, sweat pouring down his face. "There's a village wall ahead," Price said. "I'm putting her down." The landing was ugly. The skids clipped stone. The fuselage slammed hard, bouncing once before settling into a cloud of dust and debris. Sparks flashed. The rotors screamed, then slowed, then finally wound down to a hollow whine. For a moment, there was only ringing silence. Then Holt's voice cut through it. "Out. Out. Perimeter now." The doors were shoved open. SEALs poured into the dust, fanning outward, rifles up. Afghan partners followed, taking positions along low walls and doorways. Elena stayed inside long enough to secure Price to his seat, then dragged the co-pilot clear and began checking his airway. Blood pooled on the floor. Klein crouched beside them, hands shaking slightly as he tried to assess damage to the cockpit. Outside, sporadic gunfire cracked in the distance, not heavy. Yet. Holt knelt beside Price. "Can you get us airborne?" he asked. Price shook his head slowly. "Not like this." Klein swallowed. "Controls are partially shot. Engine temps are through the roof. Even if we spool, she's not staying up long." Holt closed his eyes for half a second. The radio crackled. The second helicopter called in, voice strained. "Heavy fire on approach. We're aborting. Lost comms with higher. We're pulling off." Then nothing but static. Holt straightened. His jaw tightened. He looked from the shattered cockpit to the team, then back again. "Who here can fly?" he asked. No one answered. The dust settled. Weapons remained pointed outward. Breathing sounded loud inside helmets. Tyler Reed let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Come on, sir," he said. "That's not funny." The question hung there anyway. What would you have done in that moment? Elena released her harness. The metal latch clicked softly in the broken cockpit, a small sound that somehow carried through the tension. She stood, not quickly, not with any sense of announcement, just the natural motion of someone stepping forward when something must be done. "I can," she said. Her voice barely rose above the idle hiss of hot metal cooling. For half a second, no one reacted. Then Tyler Reed let out a short breath that might have been a laugh but died in his throat before it became anything. A few SEALs turned toward Elena, not aggressively, not mockingly, more like they were trying to make sense of what they had just heard. Holt looked at her, really looked at her. "Have you flown before?" he asked. "Yes." "When?" "A long time ago." "What platform?" Elena hesitated just long enough for the silence to stretch. "Army helicopters," she said. That was it. No rank, no unit, no explanation. Holt held her gaze. Elena did not look away. Her hands rested at her sides. They were steady, not clenched, not shaking, not trying to hide inside sleeves. Behind her, the wounded pilot groaned softly. The cockpit lights flickered as Klein attempted a system check. Elena's eyes shifted to the panel, not in a wandering way, not in a curious way. They moved with purpose. She tracked gauges in sequence: fuel, hydraulics, battery, engine temperature. Holt noticed the order. He noticed how her head tilted slightly, as if she were listening to something no one else could hear. "Can you work the controls?" Holt asked. "Yes." Another simple answer. Still no story. Still no justification. As Elena shifted her weight forward, the cuff of her sleeve rode up just enough to reveal a faint rectangular patch of lighter skin near her forearm. A tan line, sharp edges. The kind left behind by something worn in the exact same place for a long time. Elena saw it at the same moment Holt did. She pulled her sleeve down. Not hurried, not embarrassed, just deliberate. Klein watched her hands as she stepped closer to the cockpit. They moved confidently. Not fast, not hesitant. Confident. "What about the collective?" Klein asked, half testing her. Elena pointed without looking. "Left side. You'll want to keep torque below red line or you'll cook what's left of the engine." Klein froze. Holt's eyes narrowed slightly. Most people guessed at terminology. They used generic words. Stick, lever, throttle. Elena did not. She spoke like someone who had spent years using the real names. She leaned closer to the panel. "Your hydraulic pressure's bleeding off. That's why the pedals feel sloppy." Klein stared at the gauge. She was right. Outside the aircraft, a dog began barking. Then another. A door slammed somewhere inside the village. Low voices carried through the dust. The night was no longer empty. It was filling. A single tracer round arced lazily across the far edge of the wall and disappeared. Holt felt the clock tighten around his chest. "Be straight with me," he said quietly. "Can you lift this bird?" Elena did not rush her answer. She took one more look at the panel. One more breath. "I can try. Not a promise. Not a guarantee, just honesty." Around them, the team remained silent. No jokes. No comments. Only the distant sounds of a village waking up and the growing awareness that whatever Elena Cross had been before, it was more than any of them had ever guessed. Holt looked from the darkened cockpit to Elena, then to the wounded pilot slumped in his seat and back again. The decision was written across his face before he ever spoke. There were no better options left on the board. Get in the seat, Holt said. Price, you talk her through whatever you can. Daniel Price swallowed and nodded, pain etched into every line of his face. I'll stay conscious as long as I can, he said. Elena did not thank anyone. She did not acknowledge the weight of what was happening. She simply stepped forward, ducked under the bent doorframe, and climbed into the cockpit. She moved like someone returning to a familiar space. Elena slid into the pilot's seat, shifted her legs into position, and adjusted the pedals with 2 quick motions. Her hands reached up, pulled the headset down, and settled it over her ears. She tugged the cord once to make sure it was seated, then glanced at the overhead panel. Her fingers began moving. Not fast, not frantic. Deliberate. Circuit breakers were pressed, toggles flipped, switches checked in a precise order. Staff Sergeant Klein watched her in disbelief. This bird's too shot up, he said. Even if you get power, you're not flying her anywhere. Elena didn't look at him. We've lost secondary hydraulics, she said. But primaries are still giving partial pressure. The right engine's hotter, but the left is stable. If we isolate the damaged side, we might get enough torque for a short lift. Klein stared at the gauges. She was reading exactly what he was seeing. We'll lose yaw authority, Klein said. I know, Elena replied. I'll compensate with pedals as long as they hold. If they don't, we set it down immediately. Price forced himself upright an inch. She's right, he said. Left engine's cleaner. Klein shook his head slowly, more to himself than anyone else. Holt leaned in through the cockpit doorway. What do you need? Elena finally looked back at him. Weight reduction, she said. Anything not needed to fight or treat wounded. Ammo boxes that aren't critical. Extra water. Loose gear. Holt hesitated. Every round mattered. Every piece of equipment mattered. But none of it mattered if they never left the ground. Do it, Holt said. SEALs moved without being told twice. Ammo cans were dragged out of the cabin and dumped near the wall. Extra packs were ripped open and stripped of non-essential items. Water jugs were shoved aside. Someone tossed a heavy breaching tool onto the ground with visible reluctance. No one complained. No one joked. Elena watched the weight come off while continuing to work through the checklist. Battery on. Fuel pumps. APU start. The auxiliary power unit whined, then caught. The cockpit lights brightened slightly. Elena's hand moved to the starter. She pressed it. The engine coughed. A harsh, grinding sound echoed through the airframe. Temperatures spiked. Klein swore. Elena released the starter immediately. Stop, she said. Give it a second. She exhaled slowly. No panic. No rush. She adjusted 2 switches, cross-checked a gauge, then tried again. The engine coughed. Then sputtered. Then caught. A rough, uneven rumble vibrated through the floor. Tense climbing, Klein warned. I see it, Elena said, holding low RPM. The rotor blades began to turn. Slow at first. Heavy. The air around the helicopter stirred, dust creeping across the ground in lazy spirals. Elena's foot pressed gently on the pedal. The nose twitched. She corrected. Don't push it, Price said weakly. I won't, Elena replied. She brought the power up in tiny increments, watching the gauges like they were living things. The vibration increased. The helicopter shuddered. The skids lightened. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the aircraft lifted. Not cleanly, not smoothly. An inch, 2 inches. The Black Hawk hovered just above the ground, wobbling like a drunk trying to stand. Hold it, Holt said, though Elena already was. The engine temperature crept higher. Elena eased the power back. The skids kissed the ground again. She did not look discouraged. She did not look surprised. She simply adjusted. I can't keep it up long, she said. We need a better spot. That orchard behind the wall. Flat ground. More cover. Holt looked through the doorway toward the gap in the wall. It was barely visible through dust and darkness, but he could make out the darker patch of trees beyond. "How far?" he asked. "Less than 100 meters, Elena said. "One short hop." Holt nodded. "Do it." Elena brought the power up again. The helicopter lifted. This time she held it. The vibration was worse. The nose wanted to drift left. She corrected. Dust exploded outward as the skids cleared the ground. Elena eased the collective forward. The Black Hawk lurched into motion, skimming low over broken earth. Rounds cracked in the distance. Someone shouted outside. Elena ignored it. Her entire world narrowed to gauges, vibration, and the dim outline of the orchard ahead. The engine temperature needle edged toward red. Elena did not look away. She did not plead with the machine. She flew it. The orchard rushed up. She flared gently. The skids hit hard. The impact jolted everyone in the cabin, but the helicopter stayed upright. Elena chopped power. The rotors slowed. Silence rushed in. No one spoke. No one cheered. They simply stared at the cockpit, trying to reconcile what they had just watched with everything they thought they knew about the quiet medic. Enemy rounds began snapping into the outer wall almost immediately. Chunks of mud brick exploded outward. The reality shifted again. They were no longer just stranded. They were under attack. Elena unbuckled, pulled off her headset, and slid out of the seat. She did not look back at the controls. She did not look at anyone. She dropped to her knees beside Daniel Price and began checking his bandage, tightening the tourniquet, adjusting pressure. "Stay with me," she said. Then she moved to the Afghan partner lying near the tree line, blood soaking through his pant leg. She worked with the same calm precision she always had. Tyler Reed watched her for several seconds. He opened his mouth like he might say something. Then he closed it. No joke came. No comment followed. For the first time since Elena Cross had joined the team, Tyler Reed simply went back to scanning his sector in silence. And that silence felt different than all the laughter that had come before. Elena finished tightening Daniel Price's bandage and reached for fresh gauze. Blood still seeped, slower now, controlled, but not finished. She worked methodically, her fingers moving with the same calm precision she had shown since the moment he was hit. Price watched her hands. Not the wound. Her hands. Years of flying left marks that never truly went away. The faint thickening along the base of the fingers. The subtle flattening of skin where friction lived day after day against cyclic grips and collective levers. It was not something most people would ever notice, but pilots noticed. Price swallowed. "Doc," he said quietly. Elena looked up. "What's your name again?" "Cross," she replied. Just the last name, nothing more. Price's brow furrowed. He squinted slightly, as if trying to pull something from deep memory. The noise of distant gunfire faded into background static as he studied her face. "Cross," he repeated. His breathing hitched. "I knew a Cross at Rucker," he said. "Years back. Army side. Training board posted a photo after a solo eval. Instructor was bragging about her hands. Said she flew smooth." Elena's eyes dropped back to the bandage. "That was a long time ago," she said. Price's gaze flicked toward Holt, then back to Elena. "She's not just someone who flew," Price said, his voice different now. Lower, certain. She was Army aviation. Holt did not respond. Price pushed through the pain. Good enough that people remembered her. Elena pressed a fresh pad into place, securing it with tape. "It doesn't matter," she said. "That life's over." She said it without bitterness, without anger. Just fact. For a moment, no one spoke. The orchard seemed to hold its breath. Wind rustled through the branches overhead. Distant gunfire continued, but it felt farther away somehow. Holt looked at Elena. Not the way he had earlier. Not as a problem to solve. Not as a desperate gamble. He looked at her as a capability he had misjudged. His shoulders straightened slightly, not a dramatic shift. Not a visible show, just a quiet realignment. Senior Chief Hanlon noticed. So did Klein. So did Tyler Reed. Elena felt none of it. She finished securing the bandage, checked Price's pulse, and moved on to the next wounded man without another word. But the space around her had changed. The jokes were gone. The doubt was gone. What remained was a heavy, unspoken understanding. Elena Cross was not who they thought she was. And whatever she had been before, it was something earned. The fight found them in waves. At first it was scattered shots from beyond the orchard wall, single cracks that echoed and disappeared. Then it turned into overlapping bursts, rounds chewing into mud brick, snapping through branches, punching into tree trunks with heavy thuds. SEALs moved into firing positions, returning controlled fire through gaps in the wall and over low stone berms. Afghan partners took positions beside them, shouting call-outs in short, urgent phrases. Dust hung thick in the air. Smoke drifted low. Between bursts, Elena could hear shouting from inside the village. Not fighters. Civilians. Someone screamed. A small shape appeared at the gap in the wall. An elderly man stumbled forward, half carrying, half dragging a child toward the clearing. The boy's legs were streaked with blood, his pants torn open by jagged shrapnel. His face was pale, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent cry. The man collapsed just inside the wall. Elena was moving before anyone told her to. She slid in beside the boy and pulled him gently toward the cover of a low tree. "What's his name?" she asked. "Yusuf," the old man said in broken English. Elena cut away the shredded fabric. Metal fragments were embedded along the boy's thigh. Blood flowed freely. She clamped a tourniquet high on the leg and tightened it until the bleeding slowed. Yusuf screamed. Elena did not flinch. She leaned close so he could hear her. "You're okay," she said. "I've got you." Her voice stayed steady even as rounds cracked overhead. She reached into her med bag, then froze. She had used more supplies than she realized. She had 2 pressure bandages left, 1 half roll of gauze. No more pain medication. She did not say a word. She began working with what she had. Behind her, Holt scanned the perimeter through his optic. "Movement left," someone called. A burst of fire erupted. Then a lull. Holt keyed his radio. "This is 1-1. We have multiple wounded and civilians. Requesting foot exfil toward grid Charlie. Any bird able to push?" Static. Then a voice. "Possible bird inbound in 15. Not guaranteed." 15 minutes in this position felt like an hour. Holt weighed the options quickly. "We move when we get the next break," he said. "We push to Charlie on foot." Elena looked up. "What about him?" she asked, nodding toward Yusuf. Holt glanced down. The boy was conscious but weak. The older village medic, Dr. Reddick, Dr. Est. Samir knelt beside them, hands shaking as he tried to help with what little he had. "If we move now, they won't make it," Elena said. Her voice was not raised, not emotional, just factual. Holt met her eyes. "We can't carry everyone," he said. "I know," Elena replied. "I'll stay until he's stable enough to move." The words landed hard. A few SEALs turned toward her. Holt stared at Elena for a long second, then another. This was the moment where commanders sometimes forced compliance. This was where rank usually ended arguments. Holt looked at Yusuf, looked at the bleeding, looked at Elena. Then he made his decision. "Ridge," he said. Senior Chief Hanlon was beside him instantly. "2 men stay with Doc," Holt said. "We hold this position until she says move." Hanlon nodded once. No questions. He walked past Elena, stopped for half a second, and gave her a small nod. Not ceremonial, not dramatic. Just acknowledgement. It carried more weight than a salute. Tyler Reed knelt on Elena's other side, rifle angled outward. His voice was low. "I'm sorry, Doc," he said. "I didn't know." Elena did not look at him. She did not answer. She slid another piece of gauze into place and applied pressure. Yusuf whimpered. Elena leaned closer. "Stay with me," she said. Around them, the fight continued. Rounds snapped. Voices shouted. Time stretched thin. But in the center of it all, Elena Cross kept working. Not as a former pilot, not as something special. Just as the medic she had always been. And that quiet dignity, under fire, became the moment no one there would ever forget. Dawn arrived quietly, not with relief, not with celebration, just a pale gray light creeping over the mountains as the last echoes of gunfire faded into memory. The second extraction bird came in low and fast, taking fire on approach but pushing through. The team loaded wounded first. Daniel Price was carried aboard on a litter, still alive. Yusuf was wrapped in a blanket and passed carefully into Elena's arms for the short run to the aircraft. Dr. Samir followed, clutching his small bag of worn tools like it was a lifeline. No one spoke during the flight back. Exhaustion pressed down on everyone. The kind that settled into bones. Back at the forward operating base, med teams took over. Price disappeared behind canvas flaps. Yusuf was rushed toward surgery. Dr. Samir was guided to a bench and given water. Elena handed Yusuf off and stood there for a moment, watching to make sure someone stayed with him. Then she turned and walked toward the med bay. Holt found her there later, standing over a sink, scrubbing dried blood from her hands. He did not start with praise. He did not mention flying. He did not mention the orchard. He held a small tablet in his hand. "I'm updating your file," Holt said. "Recommending cross-training. Not removing you from medic duties. Adding aviation as a secondary capability." Elena kept washing her hands. "That won't be necessary," she said. Holt studied her for a moment. "You don't get to decide what this team can use," he replied. "You saved more than bodies last night." Elena paused. Water ran over her fingers. Holt continued. "You saved decisions." Elena turned off the tab. She nodded once, eyes down. No smile, no argument, no visible reaction at all. "If there's nothing else, sir," she said, "I need to restock my kits." Holt stepped aside. Elena walked past him, quiet, unnoticed by anyone who didn't know better, the same way she always had. Some people wear their courage on their sleeves. Some people announce it. Some people build their entire identity around being seen. Others carry it in silence. They show it only when there is no other choice. Elena Cross was one of those. Honor isn't noise. It's what you do when nobody expects you to stand. The quiet ones rarely look like heroes. They don't stand in front of crowds. They don't tell stories about themselves. They don't correct people who get them wrong. They simply show up, carry the weight, and do what needs to be done when everything is on the line. Across battlefields, flight lines, aid stations, and forgotten corners of war, there are medics, pilots, and veterans who will never speak about what they survived or who they saved. But their silence does not mean their service was small. It means their strength was never meant to be loud. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more FOB veteran stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.